Hi, this is an introduction to the unit tests that we'll be doing in the future based on XUnit. XUnit is a framework, a tool set that we can use to create unit tests. And we had the choice of using NUnit or XUnit. They're very, very similar, but we've decided to use XUnit. So just to give you a quick, brief introduction, and this will only be a 5-minute video, so it's very brief. In the HippoIC full solution, you'll see that there's a unit tests project already. And this stuff in here is actually still very useful. So don't think, oh, we've got these old unit tests and we can't use them. It's still very useful, and I'll explain why in a minute. But here you'll see that when you run those unit tests, some of them fail. I think 25 of them fail. So although it's useful stuff, they're not going to be relied upon to work, okay? So what we're going to do with these is we're going to take some of the code from some of these to help us create the XUnit tests. So the XUnit tests are going to be in this project here, the XUnit project, which Eswar has created for us kindly. And he's set up a whole load of really useful stuff that we can use to create our XUnit tests here. As you can see here, we've got 43 unit tests that actually work. So when you click run all, these ones should be all green and they all work. 43 of them, they all work. So that's very useful, and that's a great starting point for our unit tests. Just to have a quick guide to how we're going to start. What we want to do in here is mirror as much as we can the shape of the code up here. So for example, in this case, we have EHR and then progress notes and then Chief Compliant Manager tests. So Chief Compliant Manager tests is the actual unit test code file. So you'll see here we have ehr.progress notes in the namespace, and then Chief Compliant Manager tests is the class name. Okay, so we're going to try and do it like that. And we'll give it a collection name that maps on to the collection of unit tests that we're going to create. I'll explain a lot of that later on. This is where we set up our code, so the code that we need to do before each unit test, basically, in our constructor. It has some information sent in, which the EMR setup fixture, for example, Eswar has created in another piece of code up here, there, that you can see. So we'll look into that in detail later. Just so you know, before you create a unit test, you put fact above it instead of test. In the NUnit code, you would put test, but here you put fact, so you're testing facts. And this here is a kind of documentation feature that just tells you which category the test falls into. So in this case, we're going to call it a hybrid test. It used to be called unit test, but as I explained in my email, we can't really do unit tests proper right now because we don't have all the dependency injections, infrastructure, and so on for all that to work. So we're going to call them hybrid tests, which the only difference between a unit test and a hybrid test is that unit tests do not test the underlying dependencies. They don't go through the underlying dependencies. They have mocks that pretend to be the underlying dependencies. So for example, you'd have a mock that pretends to be the database. You'd have a mock that pretends to be NHibernate, or you'd have a mock that pretends to be the PDF generator service. In our case, we don't really have those mocks properly because we don't have the interfaces and the dependency injection and so on. So most of our tests will probably be hybrid tests at this point, but we will move towards real tests. So each function within a class, we will test the function, and then we'll try from the name of the function to say what we're trying to do. We're validating the request, and it passes, and this is that kind of test. So this one is a successful hybrid test or unit test. This one down here will be a fail test. So we need in each case to test the method, at least to test the method succeeds or the method fails. That would be the minimum to test. The best thing would be to test every route through each function, each method, if we can. So in this case, for example, there are two categories that we're going to, this test is